Welcome to Learning Outcome 6, the last learning outcome of the course. Learning Outcome 6 is about communicating the results of your research. After you have collected and analyzed data, drawing conclusions is the final stage of the research process. In simple terms, conclusions should explain what the results of the research mean and how findings can be applied in a business setting. This should always be related to the original research problem that was being investigated. Conclusions and recommendations will always mark the end of the research process and are usually the main focus for managers. This means it's extremely important to present clear and precise conclusions that managers can actually use to make changes within their organizations. Some characteristics of conclusions include that conclusions must represent the researcher's informed judgment about how the organizational problem can best be solved. The key word here is informed. That means that every time a conclusion is drawn, you must have evidence to back up why you have made that conclusion. If there is no evidence, you must either find evidence, not make that claim for your conclusion, or explain that the conclusion you've drawn is speculation and not supported by evidence. Number 2, conclusions should always be related to your original research question. The results of the whole research process do not add up to a conclusion. So just explaining everything you've done is not enough. Conclusions need to provide a summary and interpretation of the results in an attempt to answer the original research question. This is just like the synthesis you had to do for your literature review. You have to synthesize all of the information you've collected, put it together to form a claim that you can back up with evidence. Number 3, conclusions are not an opportunity to present the findings the organization wants. Sometimes findings from research can be harmful to certain people or positions in an organization. In these cases, the researcher could be asked to omit certain results, provide a toned down version of the results. However, it is essential that researchers remain unbiased and report all correct results and conclusions drawn from the evidence, regardless of what the organization wanted to find. Number 4, conclusions are not an opportunity to present the findings the researcher wants either. Sometimes you could do a very long research process and not find an answer to the original research question because the research did not go as planned. This may be disappointing, but as a researcher, you must be honest and ethical and report that you did not find an answer if that is the case. Finally, conclusions are not new issues or ideas. You do not introduce new information at this stage of the research. We're going to look at some examples to help back up this theoretical definition of a conclusion. Remember that the example we've been doing throughout the course is related to the smoke-free campus policy at Cambrian College. We're going to practice writing conclusions for this. Remember, the objective was to research how smoke-free campus policies are being promoted by colleges in order to positively influence students' perceptions of the policies. Our specific research question was, how do the attitudes of students towards smoke-free policies influence their compliance? So how can we write a conclusion for the research that we've conducted on this topic throughout the course? Number 1 is that before you write your conclusion, you must think about the best way to communicate your research conclusions to your specific audience. The audience means who are you trying to communicate to. So why should you consider the audience? Let's look at this quick example. Statistics Canada has been conducting the National Cannabis Survey every quarter since February 2018. They report their findings in different ways. The first one shown on the slide is an infographic created by Statistics Canada. The infographic has a lot of pictures and icons. It shows percentages on a map of Canada so you can quickly identify cannabis use by province. When there are increases in cannabis use, they show a green upward arrow. However, on the Cannabis Stats Hub, which is the second link, it's an interactive tool that uses more charts to show percentages. It also has sliders where you can navigate between different quarters throughout the year to look for changes or patterns in usage. If you go to the Stats Hub website, you can see how you can change the slider to change different quarters, and that there's also lots of other information available. You can also look at information related to justice, the economy, and prices as well, not just use related to health. This contains many more charts and numbers, whereas the infographic is more focused on pictures, icons, and explanations. Why do you think these choices were made? Statistics Canada actually states that the purpose of its infographic is to help people, business owners, academics, and management at all levels understand key information derived from the data, whereas the Cannabis Stats Hub provides a useful way of interpreting trends behind our data on various social and economic topics. The choices of visuals used are not the same in these two visualizations because they're not geared towards the same audience. The infographic is meant to be used by the general public to explain what the Cannabis Act is, and it uses color and images to help identify changes quickly. The Cannabis Stats Hub is meant more for business people or research that need to examine more information in a less summarized format. As a researcher, every choice you make in communicating and reporting research results should depend on who the results need to be presented to or your audience. Also, to write a conclusion, you need to make a claim. Claims are not just what you think should be used to answer the research question, they must be supported by evidence. Evidence should be presented to support your claims. If you don't have evidence to back up a claim, it should not be included. You also need to discuss what your results mean. The purpose of any applied research is to find a solution to an organizational issue. So as a researcher, you should explain how your findings should be applied to solve a problem. Also, you should discuss your conclusions in order, from most relevant to the least relevant. Now we can actually look at an example of this for our smoke-free campus data. Firstly, here is a claim. Most students strongly agree with smoke-free campus policies. Whether my audience is students at Cambrian College or even the management at Cambrian College, this is an easy claim to understand. Most students agree with the smoke-free campus policy based on my research results. In order to make this easier to understand, I also have provided a graph that showed the exact results from the survey, that 11 students strongly agreed, which was the highest option for the level of agreement with the smoke-free campus policy. This is evidence that supports my claim. This chart shows that at Cambrian, most students strongly agree with the policy. This is related to my original research question, which said, how do the attitudes of students towards smoke-free policies influence their compliance? I now know that most students' attitudes are that they agree with the policy. Next, moving on to compliance. I did find that there's not 100% compliance with the smoke-free campus policy. This is a claim backed by evidence. The pie chart is the evidence that 7% of people do not comply with the smoke-free campus policy. They have broken the rules. This, again, relates back to my original topic. How do the attitudes of students towards smoke-free policies influence their compliance? This shows that not everybody complies. Also, the chart makes it easily digestible for my audience. And finally, going in order from most to least relevant, or connecting the topics as we go along, we talked about students' attitudes, we talked about their compliance, then we put it together in our third claim. There is a relationship between compliance and agreement with the smoke-free campus policy, and this is in line with other studies. This ultimately answers my research question. What is the evidence to back this up? Looking at the data, the two people who said they had broken the rules either strongly disagreed or disagreed with the policy. So it seems like people who do not agree with the policy are more willing to break the rules. This is my final claim. The table makes it more easily digestible in terms of the evidence to support it. This helps to answer my research question. Finally, once you've gone through your claims and supported them with evidence, you can try to make an interpretation and recommendation. Remember, as a researcher, you need to also discuss what the results mean. So in terms of what this means at Cambrian, maybe they need to actually get more information out to students, because we know that students positively perceive the smoke-free campus policy. However, on another question on the questionnaire, some respondents were not even aware of the smoke-free policy and rules. Therefore, maybe Cambrian could make a new marketing campaign to continue to promote the policies and clearly explain the rules about smoking zones. So where you have to go off of campus to smoke so that people aren't breaking the rules, even if they don't necessarily agree with the policy. Finally, some other recommendations for writing conclusions. You should state whether your results are in line with findings of previous research. Remember, on my third claim, I said this is in line with other studies. I know from my literature review that other studies found a similar pattern, that people who agreed with the policy would follow the rules, people who disagreed with the policy might break the rules. So I've included that was in line with previous studies to make this connection. If the findings are not in line, though, with your literature review, you should explain why there might be differences. You also should discuss any inconclusive results and explain them the best that you can. Sometimes research can lead to unexpected conclusions, so it's important to transparently report results that were not conclusive and suggest research for the future. Also, you should discuss any limitations in your research. So, some researchers are hesitant to do this because they think it's highlighting weaknesses in their research, but that's not true. You do need to describe your limitations because this can make it clear you have an in-depth understanding of your topic and you've reported objective and honest results. Also, limitations of research can help to promote future research. And finally, if your research is exploratory, suggest future research that can be carried out. So how can we do this for our smoke-free campus example? First, a limitation is that only about 30 students this semester responded to the questionnaire. This is not a large sample size because I wanted to ask at least 100 Cambrian students. Also, to align with other studies in my literature review, many studies did a pre and post test where they asked students if they agreed with the policy and about their compliance twice, once at the beginning of their studies and once at the end. So I should really ask the questionnaire again to see if opinions change over time as future research. Also, to address confusion about smoke-free rules, there should be more information collected on if students would prefer smoke-free zones or smoking zones, like having a place that you are allowed to smoke on the campus, because a lot of other studies focus on this and it could lead to more clear findings and help to inform Cambrian management about what they could do to help manage any issues with the smoke-free campus policy being broken. So all of these are recommendations for writing conclusions, and we looked at some examples for the smoke-free campus policy. Most importantly, your conclusions need to be related to your research question originally. They should answer it, and you should always back your claims up with strong evidence.